Hi class, in this chapter we're looking at how to use language successfully. Now that you know how to put together your outline, the structure of your speech, we're looking specifically what language words will you use to communicate to your audience. Remember, always think about to whom are you speaking to so you can craft your words and examples carefully. Let's look at the overview. We're looking at what makes language so important and how you can use language effectively. So let's just quickly look at what makes language so important. The importance of meaning. Words produce a meaning in a person's mind. There's 4 areas or ways that words can produce a meaning in your mind. Like for instance, when I say dog, why do you immediately think of a 4-legged animal? One is symbolic, and symbolic meaning in a sense is saying that there's some association or affiliation with that particular word. So a symbolic word would be if I say to you the American flag or a flag, or 5 intertwined rings. You think about the Olympic symbol, or a flag, the association is patriotism. So the meaning can come in a symbolic way. It could just be arbitrary. In other words, why do we see in our minds a book when I say to you book? For some reason we learn there's no connection there. It's just that we learn that a book is a bound object with pages bound with pictures inside that area, and that's our book. Words are also denotative and connotative, meaning of words. Denotative means the direct dictionary definition, and connotative is the feelings that are evoked, the colorings that come out when you say a word. So if we look up a word in the dictionary, we will see many different definitions. And you can directly use that definition. But sometimes it's just not appropriate to use a definition directly out of a dictionary because there's a lot of connotation to the word, whether it's personal or it's within our society. For instance, let me give you an example. If you went to a meeting and you were talking about the budget, and you said in the meeting that this budget is retarded. The budget is retarded to our students and to our society. Is that correct or is it incorrect? Well, probably you would choose not to use that word because in our society, the connotation of the word retard or retarded means someone who's mentally challenged. And we know that's inappropriate to use. However, if I look up the denotative definition of retard, it means to hold back. So it would be used in a denotative way, but we know in a connotative way, the meaning or the colorings of the word is inappropriate. So meaning of words, whether it's symbolic, it's arbitrary, or it's denotative or connotative. Culture brings in the dynamic, definition of words. They're shared through a symbolic interaction. We know that within our culture, we have certain symbols that we use, certain words we use, certain slang that we understand within our particular culture. We know that we have symbols that we use as nonverbal symbols. It's a way of communication. Know that perhaps this symbol means good job in America, but in Iraq it means something very profound, almost as up yours. So it would have a totally different meaning. So that's learned within the culture. Excuse me. Language, when you deliver a speech or you deliver a presentation, you're considered to have power. You are considered to be ethical, and you're considered to be truthful in what you are saying. So language can unite people for a common cause. It can influence actions. It can create and maintain inequality if it's not used, or it can create equality or freedom. Okay, so we know how we use language. We know that language is powerful. We know that as a speaker, you can move people to do things for the good and the bad. Martin Luther King Jr. was a powerful speaker that made many remarkable revolutions in our society. Adolf Hitler was a powerful speaker, and he used his words in a negative way. So we see how words and language can move and be powerful. How can you use language effectively in your speech? And I want you to think about this. I want you to think about how you're using your words, because it may not happen the first time that you're practicing. You may think about ways to maybe be a little more in sync to your audience and a little more clear to your audience members. But you want to think about the appropriate language level, okay? Be aware of jargon and be cautious of acronyms and abbreviations. So what we're saying here as far as are you speaking to a group of college students? Okay, so you want to use language that relates to a college student, someone who is gaining knowledge, someone who is eager to learn. Use that appropriate language. The extreme is speaking to a child or speaking to an older adult. We know that you would use different language, maybe more informality because of the age difference. But again, think about the language level and think about the words you're using, that they understand the particular words that you are conveying. Do not try to impress your audience by using big, long words that you had to look up in the dictionary, but sounds really good, because they won't understand what you're saying. And guess what? They'll just turn you off, because if it's a word they don't understand, they probably will stop listening. Be aware of jargon, and as we know, jargon is technical terms or words that are used for a particular field, for a particular profession. Jargon can also be used within a subculture. So, jargon within a professional field, let's think about computer jargon. We talk about a mouse, a motherboard. Those are words that are for computer people. Think about if you ever went to a prison. You visited people in prison, or maybe you were in prison. Certain words are used to convey messages. That's jargon. Teenagers have jargon. Maybe even folks that are in different social classes have jargon. So what we're saying here is don't use jargon unless you're speaking to people who all understand that particular jargon. An example would be is if you're in the military and you're speaking to all military people, you could use that jargon. Actually, it makes you connect better with your audience. However, if there's one person in that audience who is not a military member, don't use those terms. Be cautious with abbreviation and acronyms. Going back to the military, a lot of acronyms. The military uses healthcare professionals, use acronyms and abbreviations, but be cautious again that you're thinking of your audience as you're speaking. Be correct. Common language mistakes. A misplaced modifier. A misplaced modifier, modifiers are great because they kind of modify a word or phrase in which you're saying. But if they're misplaced, it may be difficult for your audience to understand. I wrote down an example here. A misplaced modifier. The patient was referred to a psychologist with emotional problems. Okay. A patient was referred to a psychologist with emotional problems. And we see here the patient and emotional problems. They're separated by the psychologist. We should say the patient with emotional problems was referred to a psychologist. So do you see if you misplace that modifier in your sentence, in what you're saying, may be confusing. Okay, pronouns, what we're saying here is to be sure that the most common mistake is that if it's a singular or plural pronoun and that it's in agreement with the verb. They are, she is, not they is or she are. I know that's very unusual to be said, but to be sure too that they are in agreement. Other areas in your book has many examples of use pronouns, and I would suggest that you peruse that area as far as the form of the pronoun and the structure of the sentence. If you find that you fall into one of these areas of misuse of pronouns, look at ways to correct your use of pronouns. The difference between went versus gone, which is a common language mistake. She went, she has gone, okay? Not she gone, she's gone, she gone, has gone. And subject-verb agreement, again, if you're using a plural subject, make sure that your verb is plural as well, the same with singular. Be specific. This is important. This is where we need to be concrete with our words. We want to be sure that when we're practicing our speech, that your audience has the same visual as you want, as you portray in your mind. For instance, your words that you're using, as we know, can be very arbitrary. That your audience is visualizing what you want them to visualize. Sometimes I do a quick exercise in class where I ask students to write down the first thing they see when I say the word milk. And it's amazing, out of a group of 25 students, how there are so many different responses. Some people see chocolate milk, some people see white milk, some people see cow, some people see Oreos, some people see a cross or a circle with a cross through it because they don't like milk. So the simple word milk, you would never think that you would need to be a little more specific. So tell your audience, be concrete. Chocolate milk in a glass container is what you want to talk about. Be descriptive. I sometimes tell students that, if you're talking about college students, well, there could be a college student at Harvard, college student at Shippensburg, college student at Hack. So tell us, a college student in a Hack class, in a Hack communication class, in a Hack communication class delivering a speech. So you see how you go from very broad to very narrow. Avoid fillers and unnecessary words. A lot of times, sometimes we'll use like, and we may use them several times. If you're finding as you're practicing your speech and you're using a lot of filler words, replace them with transitional words. So for instance, if you're using a lot, find transitional words, 5 transitional words that work well. Therefore, in addition, also, and replace those ums with the transitional word. Or what I highly suggest is replace it with a remarkable 3-second pause. A pause brings back your audience. It allows you to breathe as a speaker, and you do not create a filler word. And use an active voice. Okay, be active in what you're speaking about. Be very enthusiastic in your voice. Okay, use an effective oral style. Be informal, animated, simple sentence structure. Come up with your style, embellish on that. Remember, we're looking at conversational type of speaking, extemporaneous speaking. Keep that in mind as you're practicing. You're not reading from a manuscript. Oral style means, what is your speech delivery style? Be appropriate. We live in a politically correct world. Be appropriate when you're speaking. Use correct gender neutral language. If you're talking about a policeman, make sure it's a man. If you're not, police officer. Culturally appropriate, unbiased language. Don't bring in bias. Do not ever bring bias into my class or whenever you're speaking, but make sure that your language is culturally appropriate. Please review this information in your textbook. Be distinctive. Make sure that you appeal to the senses, embellish your language, and use speech devices. What works really well is the use of similes and metaphors and analogies. Similes, comparing, using like her as, she swam like a rock. That gives a good, distinctive visual in the minds of your audience. appeal to the senses of your audience.